The day everything changed for Étienne Dufresne at the Jean-Jacques Rousseau College in Montauban, Southwest France, did not begin spectacularly. It wasn't a day marked by flashing lights or an announcement over the intercom that something extraordinary was about to happen. It was simply an ordinary morning, and, like every other day, Étienne got ready for class. Yet, deep inside, he felt something different, an almost imperceptible sensation, a premonition that this day would not follow the usual monotonous routine. The story of Étienne in many ways that of an ordinary boy in an ordinary place with a simple environment. He lived with his mother in a key neighborhood, surrounded by terraced houses, old trees that creaked in the wind, and neighbors who greeted each other every morning. It was a place where relationships made handle, where people knew each other well, often smiling as they crossed paths. But this family environment did not protect him from the challenge he faced at school, where the dynamics were very different. It was a world of rumor, unspoken judgment, popularity contest, favoritism, and, above all, teacher, each with their own way of showing whether they liked or disliked a student. Étienne was a calm boy, reserved but not shy. His silence wasn't a sign of insecurity, but rather a product of observation. He liked to observe those around him, learning at his own pace, discovering new things quietly. He often tapped his pencil gently against the edge of his notebook when he was thinking. Tap, tap, tap. That noise, rhythmic and subtle, helped him concentrate. Every morning, his mother would greet him at the door with the same admonishment, Étienne, stop making that noise with your pencil. The teacher don't like it. But he couldn't help it. It was his way of connecting to the world. That day, as the sunlight filtered through the blinds of the historic classroom, Étienne took his usual seat by the window. He was rereading a questionnaire the teacher had distributed the previous week. This wasn't a formal exam but an exercise to help the student refresh their memory about the American Civil War before delving deeper into the topic. Miss Charlotte Martin, the 6th grade teacher, had built a reputation for being strict but fair. At least, that is what many students said. In her almost 15 years of teaching, she had applied a method based on order and respect for rule. However, Étienne couldn't help but feel that in reality, she had her favorite student she paid more attention to and other whom she almost entirely ignored. Sadly, he seemed to belong to the latter group. The way she ignored him wasn't obvious or direct. She never yelled at him or said anything hurtful, but it was easy to notice that she almost never called on him in class and when, by chance, he did participate and answer correctly, she would simply nod and quickly change the subject. On the rare occasion when he made a mistake something almost an hour of since Étienne was kid studio she would linger a moment longer, explaining his mistake in a way that almost seemed to emphasize how much more effort he needed to put in. He wasn't the only one who noticed. H.I.S. friend Thierry Lemoine had pointed it out more than once, jokingly but with a touch of seriousness, Étienne, it's like you have an invisibility power with her. She never calls on you. I suppose so, Étienne replied with a shrug. He found it pointless to dwell on it, preferring instead to focus on what he could control his homework, his project, his reading at home, and, above all, his great inherited passion, music. But that day, something in Miss Martin's attitude seemed strange. Every now and then, she would fix her gaze on him for a few seconds, as if she were assessing or measuring him for some unknown reason. The lesson progressed, and Étienne kept his open notebook, jotting down that, names, and military tactics related to the Civil War, hoping, always, not to be called on. However, a key hunch told him that something was about to change. Then, suddenly, Miss Martin spoke in a clear voice, Étienne, why don't you answer this question? A subtle silence settled over the room. A few students looked up from their notebook, surprised. It wasn't usual for her to call on him. Étienne stood up naturally, feeling both calm and nervous. This is the march to General Sherman's force, he said. It was a military campaign designed to undermine the Confederacy's resource and morale by cutting ETS supply lines. His response was concise and precise, a reflex from years of diligent study. Miss Martin nodded slightly, a gesture difficult to interpret. It's not bad, she murmured. Étienne noticed how some classmates exchanged look, a few of them seemingly as surprised as he was. Thierry made a suite gesture, I've to say, what just happened. But everything continued if nothing had changed, a two door had been left ajar, waiting for a more decisive moment. The class went on without further incident until the bell rang, signaling the end of the hour. It was customary for students to begin packing up before the teacher had even finished speaking. But just at that moment, Miss Martin raised her voice, addressing Etienne directly, Monk, can you stay for a while? Such a request was unusual for her, and many students turned their head in curiosity. The more curious ones stayed for a moment, pretending to take their time in packing up. Etienne, for his part, moved with the calmness of someone who knew they had nothing to reproach themselves for and approached her desk, his notebook clutched to his chest. What would you like, Miss Martin? He asked, trying to keep his voice as neutral as possible. The teacher leaned back in her chair and crossed her fingers in a theatrical gesture. I overheard you talking about something the other day, she began. You mentioned your grandfather and that he was a musician. Is that right? Etienne frowned, not remembering discussing his grandfather in class, Touge had spoken about him in the hallway to Thierry. Yes, my grandfather was a pianist. He played et replied, not looking away. Interesting, Miss Martin murmure. I wonder if you learned anything from him. A tense silence followed, and Etienne didn't fully understand what she was expecting from him. Shrugging slightly, he replied, a little, I suppose. The curvature of Miss Martin's lips suggested something less like admiration and more like the satisfaction of having discovered a piece of the puzzle. That small, almost condescending smile seemed to signal a plan had been set in motion. Tomorrow, she said, stretching out the word, I'd like you to show us what you've learned. See that piano? She pointed to the all upright piano in the corner of the room, covered in dust and stacked with books. I want you to play something for the class. Etienne felt a twinge of anxiety, Touge didn't look away. Why? The question slipped out before he could stop it. Because, she replied, her tone sharp with a layer of false politeness, I want to see what you can do, Etienne. I'm sure your classmate will enjoy it. Etienne had no illusion. He knew this wasn't a compliment or an opportunity. Miss Martin's expression seemed more like an attempt to put him on display, to make him the subject of ridicule, to expose him to mockery. The reason behind it remained unclear, but that hardly mattered to Etienne. What was certain was that the next day, he would have to sit at that piano and play. The night before, he barely slept. His mind replayed the conversation over and over again, wondering what Miss Martin truly wanted from him. What were her intentions, and how would the class react? He recalled time spent at his grandfather's house, sitting in an all-velvet armchair, hearing advice on improvisation, the rhythm of blues, and the swing of jazz. He had grown up with music, and Touge wasn't a professional virtuoso, he had inherited his family's passion for it. The next morning, I walked down the school corridor, and felt the curious look of his classmate on his skin. Some student approached him seriously, are you going to play today? Since when have you been playing the piano? He didn't know you could play music. He didn't say much in response, simply moving forward with his backpack and heading toward his usual spot. Thierry, sitting next to him, tried to encourage him. It's going to be fine, don't worry. Did you know there's a piano in the classroom? It's super all. Almost no one uses it. I know, but I just needed to ring, the monk sighed in response. Meanwhile, Miss Madame Martin arrived with the same impeccable punctuality as always, placing her books on the desk and scanning the class when she began the lesson. She seemed to avoid the subject of the piano for the first few minutes, instead reviewing notes and recalling some historical facts. But there was a sense in the air of what was coming. Toward the middle of the lesson, the teacher abruptly closed her book, which rattled on the table. We have a little time left before moving on to the next activity. The monk, would you be kind enough to show us what you can do? A murmur ran through the class. Olivier, one of the most teasing boys, let out a little log. Camille Lemoine, seated at the back, leaned forward to see better. Thierry pursed his lips and gave his friend a look full of courage. The monk stood up, feeling a knot in his stomach. E slowly walked towards the piano, counting his steps and holding his breath. He talked about not doing it, talked about protesting, but something inside him told him it was time to silence the doctor and show what he was truly capable of. The piano, I remembered it from yesterday, was covered in a thin layer of dust. Running his fingertip over the keys, he felt the rugness of accumulated dirt and a faint smell of aged wood. It was out of tune, but not catastrophically so, just a semitone here and there. He could work with that. The monk sat on the bench, and for a moment, the whole class fell into deep silence, if everyone was holding their breath, waiting for the first chord. Even Miss Madame Martin, with her arms crossed, observed him with a certain intrigue. He placed his finger carefully, remembering the warmth of his grandfather's piano, the comforting sound of his family afternoon. For a moment, he saw the silhouette of his grandfather sitting next to him, saying, "When you play your story and your art." The monk pressed the first note, a soft chorded vibrated in the air. The acoustic of the classroom, with its white walls and amplified silence, made it almost magical. Et began a blues progression, rising and falling with the typical cadence of classical jazz. His left hand kept the rhythm while his right ventured into improvised melody. The sound was clear, despite the light of the shores, and on the face of some classmates, surprise appeared. Perhaps they had expected the monk to stumble on the keys or lose his rhythm at the first difficulty, but that didn't happen. Time seemed to stand still. Each note fit seamlessly into the next, weaving a story that word couldn't capture. He didn't take his eyes off the piano keys, feeling his trace not from stage fright, but from the excitement of doing what he loved in front of everyone, without any filter or excuse. After the first bar, he increased the complexity, assembling faste passage, integrating ascending scale that resonated with power. The piano creaked a little under the effort, but it kept sounding with dignity. A murmur of admiration spread across the room when, in an unexpected harmonic turn, he evoked the old jazz standard his grandfather had taught him. The melody soared from one register to another, and Pierre Lemoine accompanied it with precise chords, feeling a tingling sensation of pure adrenaline in his finger. At one point, a couple of boys in the back sat up straight in their seat, leaning in to get a better view. Camille let out an almost inaudible wow, and Thierry smiled with a glint of pride in his eyes. Olivier, who had logged at the beginning, was now spinkled, unsure of how to react. Meanwhile, Miss Madame Martin, her arms still crossed, kept a serious expression, but her face betrayed a of confusion. She had probably never imagined that this boy, who always seemed invisible to her, possessed such a talent a passion that shattered all preconceived notions. The monk continued to play, closing his eyes at times to let himself be carried away. His finger raced at breakneck speed, and I strung together several powerful chords, and felt the weight of the music spread through the room. It was as if every wall vibrated with the echo of his determination. Then, the moment came. A final chord resonated deeply, prolonged, an explosion of sound that gradually faded. When the music stopped, Pierre Lemoine remained with his hand in the air, hovering above the keys, if afraid to break the silence and adwavant with his music. The room stayed silent for what felt like 5 seconds an eternity in academic terms. Then, someone, we don't know who, started clapping. Within a few heartbeats, the entire class joined in the applause. It was a crash of recognition and hadn't expected from so many people. Thierry stood up, smiling as if he had played himself. Olivier shook his head in disbelief, muttering something like, he had no idea this guy could do that. Other voices joined in, and for a moment, Miss Madame Martin's room felt like an auditorium, completely captivated by Pierre Lemoine's talent. Through this, the teacher remained at her desk, arms crossed, not joining in the applause. Her expression was tight, hard to read, her eyes seemed clouded with confusion. When the applause finally died down, she uncrossed her arms and, in a DRY voice, ordered, "Okay, that's enough, let's get back to the lesson." A murmur of disapproval ran through the student, who had been expecting at least some recognition or congratulation. But the teacher merely continued her lecture on the Civil War, as took the monk's performance had no academic value. Olivier, the same boy who had logged earlier, raised his hand nonchalantly. "That's it, Miss, et said, Easton slightly défiant. The monk just gave us an incredible performance, and you act like nothing happened. Miss Madame Martin glared at him, and an automatic silence fell over the class however, the atmosphere had shifted. Before, her authority had been in question, almost intouchable. Now, Someone had dared to challenge it openly. And not just that many of the students seemed to share the same sentiment. It was clear that the professor wasn't used to being challenged in this way, and Pierre Lemoine, for his part, returned to his seat. He wasn't looking for conflict, but he passed the professor, he didn't look down. He remained calm, I took this was all part of a destiny he could no longer avoid. I sat down, Thierry nudged him with his elbow and smiled. How are you doing? Yes, replied Pierre Lemoine, trying to control the adrenaline still coursing through his body. Just surprised. The teacher, trying to regain control of the class, continued the lesson. But it was clear that many students were still absorbed by Pierre Lemoine, if waiting for him to say or do something more. Among the murmurs, some commented on how awesome it was. Others said they had no idea he could play, and a few thought the teacher had behaved poorly by ignoring his talent. That evening, when the bell rang and the student rushed into the hallway, Pierre Lemoine felt a wave of students approaching him, saying things like, "Good job, Boo, you play really well," and inviting him to perform again perhaps at a school event. He was stunned by so much attention and simply nodded, smiling shyly. "He told you so," Thierry said, patting him on the back. "You are amazing." The monk shook his head. I guess he didn't expect anything from me, he murmured. That is the best part. Nobody saw it coming. Before going out into the hallway, the teacher called her again with a tone that was less imperative than before, but still just as serious. And the monk, remember that this is still my class. I know, he replied, looking at her firmly, but I am not invisible. She didn't answer, to her eyes reflected a certain surprise, perhaps because of the courage this student had shown. He was someone she had always kept at the periphery of her attention through the year. With a slight shake of the head, the monk turned and left. The way back was pleasant. The monk felt the afternoon breeze on his face a reward for his effort. He stopped at Monsieur Hanson's store to buy a bottle of water, and the shopkeeper greeted him with a knowing smile. "Did something good happen to you today?" Monsieur Hanson asked. "I can see it in your face." "You could say that," the monk replied. When he arrived home, the comforting smell of the kitchen greeted him warmly. His mother was making fourcars and cornbread. When she saw him enter, she immediately noticed something had changed in her son. Was it a good day or a bad day? She asked curiously. A different day, definitely, the monk said. I placed his bag on the chair. He sat down and told her everything in detail, how the teacher Madame Dupont had challenged him, how he had played the piano, how his classmate had reacted, and how the teacher had remained almost shocked. His mother listened, a mixture of pride and concern on her face, without interrupting. "My son, this teacher is testing you," she said, looking at him tenderly. "How do you feel about this?" "Well, actually," he replied with a shrug, "I think it was something that had to happen. I needed to show myself, and she needed to see it." His mother ruffled his hair and smiled. "You are the same as your grandfather. You test yourself like a mule, but with great talent. I'm glad you finally shine without fear." That night, I prepared to sleep, the monk thought about what had happened. He remembered the mocking laughter of certain classmates, the skepticism of the teacher, and the heavy silence before he started playing. Everything had converged into a moment where he transformed doubt into admiration. He understood something fundamental, Sometim, when the world expects you to fail, the best response isn't to say anything, but to do what you do best and let the result speak for you. He looked up at the photo of his grandfather on the wall, the one with his old grand piano, smiling with the wisdom that only time can provide. The monk felt warmth in his chest, thinking that somehow, his grandfather had been with him in that classroom. The next morning, when the monk walked through the school door, he noticed a special atmosphere. People who had never spoken to him before greeted him some shyly, others with admiration. E received comments like, "Be a monk, you did a great job. I didn't know we had a prodigy in the class. You'll come back to play?" Although most of it was well-intentioned, he also noticed a few whispers behind his back. Some were probably annoyed that a key boy was attracting so much attention. But most of his peers behaved differently, finally seeing him assume on with his own light. At lunch in the canteen, several classmates sat at his table. Camille Lemoine, who until then had only spoken to him to ask for notes, sat down opposite him. "It's true that you've been playing the piano since you were 5, right?" Camille asked. "Yes," the monk replied, "my grandfather taught me the basic, and then he taught myself. I'm not professional, but I really enjoy practicing." Camille looked him up and down with sincere curiosity. "Amazing. You should join the school group." "I don't know," the monk said, scratching the back of his neck. He never talked about joining school group. Thierry shook his head and replied, "Dude, you need to think about it. It would be a great addition. You could play at the fall concert." The monk, both amused and nervous, felt overwhelmed by all the attention, but also grateful. He noticed that his status at school had changed almost overnight. During recess, in the hallway, Madame Dupont passed with her usual seriousness, holding a stack of notebooks to her chest. She made Lemoine's gaze for a second, and instead of the usual indifference, he saw something that resembled à un unease. She looked away first, her expression frozen. The monk understood that, despite what had happened, the teacher would not openly admit that she was wrong or prejudiced against him. However, she would no longer be able to ignore him as she had before. There had been a shift in their relationship, which, in a way, had diminished her indisputable authority over him. On that day, the monk reflected on how life can change in an instant. He had been in the background, so made him feeling neglected. And it had only taken one decisive moment when he showed his talent for everyone to open their eyes. He also thought of the other boys and girls who felt invisible in class, those who didn't stand out in sport, the shy ones who never raised their hand, or those with less popular talent who were perhaps never recognized. He promised himself that, if one day he had the chance, he would help or encourage them because he knew what it was like to go unnoticed. Very good, he thought, reflecting on the feeling of being ignored. Before continuing with this story, he would like to take a quick break to tell you, dear readers, that if this story inspires you, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps others discover stories like this filled with music, self-surpassing, and courage. So, don't stay behind and join our community now. Let's continue with this story, which is just beginning to unfold. What happened with Miss Madame Martin left a lasting impact through the school, not just on Louis. In the weeks that followed, Madame Martin maintained a firm attitude. She no longer asked Louis to play the piano in class and didn't comment on what had happened. However, every now and then, her eyes would wander to him, as trying to solve a riddle. Louis continued this routine diligently, participating in discussion when he had something to contribute, and focusing on his task. Occasionally, some student would approach him, asking to hear another excerpt from Yasso or to inquire about the chores they had used. At the same time, he began to seriously consider joining the school band. The music teacher, Monsieur Lefebvre, had said to him, "He heard what you did in class with Madame Martin. Would you like to prepare for the end-of-year talent festival?" Although he was excited by the idea, something held him back. Perhaps it was the memory of Madame Martin's impassive face, or maybe the fear that everyone would expect too much of him. Louis didn't want to become a school star overnight, but he also knew that this could open doors for him both personally and artistically. One afternoon, I was walking home, Thierry met him halfway. The sky was covered with grey clouds, and it looked like rain. The Talent Festival could be an incredible springboard. "Why are you so hesitant?" Thierry asked. Louis looked at him frankly. "I don't know, Thierry. It's great that everyone wants me to play now, but before, no one noticed me. I don't want it to be just a trend. But it's not your fault if people are interested now," Thierry replied. "If you have a gift for music and you like it, share it. Don't keep something to yourself that could make others happy." Louis talked about his word and remembered what his grandfather had always told him, music is a universal language. If you master it, you must share it with the world. Louis' mother noticed that he was becoming more tactful. One night, she caught him looking at all photo and sheet music in the living room. My son, what are you looking for? She asked. I'm looking for my grandfather's score, et replié. He had a few songs he'd like to try playing for the talent festival. So, you're going to participate, right? She asked. Louis nodded hesitantly. Yes, but I don't know if I'm doing it for myself or to prove something. Do it for both of them, his mother said. Prove to yourself that you can, and prove to the world that there is a talent within you that deserves to be heard. I spoke. Louis remembered the afternoon when his grandfather taught him how to slide his finger across the keys without fear. Let it flow like a river, the old man had said. Every note should have a purpose. The young man felt a l'alpinistroa, a mixture of nostalgia and ambition. By the way, who is following this story? Hit the like button and subscribe for more stories like this. We don't want you to miss a single chapter of a story full of passion, self-surpassing, and music. Plus, your support motivates us to continue creating quality content. Back at Jefferson School, the atmosphere was changing not just for Louis, but for everyone. Madame Martin's attitude also began to spark comments among parents and teachers. It was said in the corridor that she was very strict, that some students felt under pressure, and that she was not a fair her reputation suggested. But none of it was official, just whisper. A few teachers familiar with the piano scene chatted in the staff room. It is said that Miss Madame Martin ridiculed a student and then put her in her place by playing the piano. Dramatically, maybe she didn't want to overdo it. Perhaps it was this simple educational attempt, another commented. But knowing the situation well, he doubted it. The stories multiplied, and Pierre Lemoine became the center of the most varied version. Some said they yelled at the teacher, others said they had a private argument. But the truth was much simpler. He had just played the piano and proved that he was not invisible. As the weeks passed and Pierre Lemoine practiced every afternoon, his mother, delighted to see him so concentrated, allowed him to use his grandfather's piano, en l'instrument with worn wood, but sound remained noble. So met him, after long hours of rehearsal, Pierre Lemoine remained tactful, wondering why his mistress had reacted in this way. This coldness after his performance continued to haunt him. It was then that, at Thierry's suggestion, he decided to seek advice from Professor Monsieur Lefebvre, a man renowned for being more open and close to his students. Professor, how do you deal with the pressure of performing in front of people who expect you to fail? Pierre asked. Professor Monsieur Lefebvre, a man with a frank smile and a fatherly look, replied, music is not for those who expect you to fail, music is for those who wish to hear something real. If some people want to see you fail, leave them to their end. Play for yourself. Play for those who support you, for your family, for your grandfather who taught you. That night, Pierre Lemoine returned home with a slightly light heart, convinced that his participation in the festival was not just a whim, but a way of honoring his grandfather and remaining true to himself. The day of the first trio for the festival arrived. Several participants found themselves in the school auditorium. There were dances, singers, and even a group of boys doing breakdancing. Pierre Lemoine sat at the piano with the score he had chosen, a mixture of blues and classical music. When he began to play, he felt the same magic always the tingling sensation in his fingertip that told him he belonged. Most people were impressed. Some, like Camille, said to him, "You are a genius, Pierre Lemoine. Why didn't you show yourself before?" Because no one asked, he replied with a shy smile, without rancor. The teacher, Monsieur Lefebvre, was satisfied and patted him on the shoulder. Keep it up, the festival is in 2 weeks, and you'll tear it up if you have fun. If you like this story, a little break for those who read us, leave a comment below telling us where you're following us from. We love hearing how people from different corners of the world connect through these stories. Your comment will help this community grow and share even more. Meanwhile, Miss Madame Martin continued her lesson, maintaining her firm character, Sommetim with a more severe tone when she referred to Pierre Lemoine, if she wanted to resume the dynamic from before. But the balance had shifted. H.I.S. Conrad no longer saw him as the almost invisible boy, but as the pianist or the intrepid Pierre Lemoine. Once, while talking about the festival in class, the teacher made a comment that sounded sarcastic. Look like the talent festival is going to be interesting. He was told that several of my students were participating. She cast a furtive glance at Pierre Lemoine. I hope they don't forget to study history just because they are too busy playing instruments. It wasn't an overtly offensive comment, but it had the effect of a poisoned dagger. Pierre Lemoine, without raising his voice, responded calmly. Don't worry, Miss Madame Martin, I can do both. This little altercation made the atmosphere tense, but the class continued. At the end, some classmates were whispering, what is happening to the teacher? Why is she like that with him? Maybe it bothers her that she can't control him like the otter. At home, when Pierre Lemoine told his mother about the episode, she frowned. Does she treat you badly? No, not directly, but indirectly. Yes, she seemed to be upset. If she crossed the line, tell me, she replied with determination. He wanted let anyone pull you down for no reason. But Pierre Lemoine did not want to make it a bigger deal. He preferred to prove through his action that he could shine regardless of the mistress' opinion. The young man continued to rehearse every afternoon. After finishing his homework, he would sit at the piano and rehearse the pièce chosen for the festival. He worked on precision, improvisation, and expression. He remembered every piece of advice from his grandfather, every anecdote, and he strove to refine his repertoire to live up to what he had imposed on himself. So met him, Thierry came to his house to listen to him and encourage him. Brother, you are playing better and better. He can't wait to see how everyone react. Thank you, sighs. One afternoon, after class, Pierre Lemoine decided to stay a little longer in the library to learn more about the Civil War in order to strengthen his knowledge for Miss Madame Martin's subject. While he was looking for books, Someone approached it was her, the teacher, with her elegant posture and severe aura. And the monk, what are you doing here too? She asked, a little surprised as she observed him for her class. I'm studying for the final exam, miss, he replied. I want to understand everything clearly, he added. She seemed to analyze him for a few seconds, if weighing whether to believe him or not. I'm glad you care about your class, she said impersonally. Don't neglect your studies for the festival. The monk who was there didn't really want to talk. He wanted. A moment of silence settled. The teacher looked at him if she wanted to say something deeper, but the moment passed. She left without further explanation, and Pierre Lemoine, deep inside, felt a slight feeling of compassion toward her. She seemed like someone who didn't know how to recognize her mistake, nor how to deal with a student she had underestimated. So the days passed, getting closer and closer to this big event called the Jefferson School Talent Festival. The way grew. Poster in the hallway, announcement on the sound system, whisper about who would sing the best, who would do the most impressive choreography, and who would manage to surprise everyone with an unusual instrument or act. The name Lemoine came up frequently. For many, it was the big revelation, a hidden pianist who emerged from nowhere to defy the unspoken rule of popularity. Otter looked at him with suspicion, if he were just a passing fad, but he remained firm, neither getting carried away by compliment nor frightened by criticism. He had decided to introduce himself and would do it the best way he knew how. 2 days before the festival, Pierre was at home, revising a complex chord that mixed modern blues. Suddenly his mother came in with a glass of lemonade. Hey, my son, you really need a break. Thank you, Mom. She sat next to him, observing the piano keys. You know, your grandfather would be proud to see you, to know that everything he taught you doesn't stay at home, but that you share it with the world. Pierre Lemoine stroked the piano keys with his fingertip. So met him, I'm afraid of not being good enough. Not being able to measure up to your grandfather, perhaps he said. He always said that music is an evolution, that everyone brings their own essence. It's not about imitation, but about feeling. And that is what truly matters. The long awaited day arrived. The school auditorium was decorated with garland and balloon. A simple stage had been set up, with a few microphones, en amplifié, and, of course, en electric piano. The whole upright piano would remain in the history room. The monk arrived early, carrying his music and trying to calm his nerve. Several participants were doing sound check, and a few teachers were supervising the organization. Among the audience were parents, friends, and students of all levels. Le moine's mother sat in one of the front rows, a serene smile on her face and a look filled with pride. Thierry appeared at the side of the stage to wish him good luck. "You're going to tear everything up," he said. "I trust you." The order of the presentation had been defined the week before, and the month was almost at an end. Perhaps because of the impact his performance promised, Louis observed the other boys singing and reciting, delighted by the diversity of talent. But deep down, a little feeling of anxiety lingered I waited in the wings. The silhouette of Miss Martin appeared in the audience, showing a serious expression. Perhaps she was there a mist or simply out of obligation. The school didn't applaud much, she just observed. Pierre Lemoine, singer, felt a knot in his stomach. What would she think now? Was she going to keep waiting for him to fail? When they finally announced Louis' turn, the lights dimmed. Et when on stage to the applause of encouragement from some Conrad, stage fright constricting his throat. He sat down at the electric piano, took a deep breath, and looked around the front rows. He saw his mother smiling at him, and he gave himself courage. This piece he said into the microphone, I dedicate to my grandfather, the man who taught me to love music. He played the first note and immediately felt in his element. He began with gentle blues, had un touch of improvisation. After a few bars, emerged small fragments of classical jazz, bringing a lively color to the melody. The room was silent, absorbed by the sounds. He felt each touch like an extension of his mind and he sat. The climax came when he moved to a fast tempo with ascending scale and complex chords that tested the coordination of both hands. He allowed himself to close his eyes, trusting in the muscle memory he had worked so hard on. The end was a majestic chord that echoed powerfully through the speaker. A moment of total silence followed, and then a wave of enthusiastic applause swept through the auditorium. People stood up bravely, and a loud echo filled the back of the room. Louis stood up with his atracing and made a small bow as a sign of thanks. From the stage, Pierre Lemoine looked around for the silhouette of Professor Madame Dupont among the audience. He noticed that although she did not stand up, she was clapping, whisperingly. Thérèse May, and for a moment, he thought he saw something resembling acceptance in her eyes, maybe even a glimmer of suppressed pride. He would never know for sure, but the fact that she was clapping was already important. After the festival, Louis was surrounded by his classmates and teachers who congratulated him. The school principal shook his hand and told him he hoped he would join the group and continue collaborating at our events. The teacher, Monsieur Lefebvre, almost dragged them away, proud to see so many hours of rehearsal come to fruition. Louis' mother arrived, tears in her eyes. "I'm so happy, my son, you did an amazing job," she said, kissing him on the forehead. "Thank you, Mom, for everything." For his part, Thierry lifted him in an exaggerated gesture of celebration. "You are the best guy." Later, when the auditorium was almost empty and there was no life near the stage, Louis decided to come closer. He felt it was time to close that chapter. "Miss Madame Martin," he said respectfully, "thank you for coming." She did not smile, but neither did she show her usual coldness. It was a good performance. Louis' words were curt, lacking the effusiveness Otter had shown, but the simple fact that she acknowledged him was significant. And Louis agreed sincerely, without rancor. The professor looked at him a moment longer. "Maybe wasn't he completely impartial with you during the class," she admitted half-heartedly without explanation. "But he recognized that you have talent." There was no more dialogue, no hug, no handshake, but in those few seconds, it was clear that something had balanced out, and Louis felt satisfied. He didn't need her to apologize. He just wanted to heal the wound of indifference. By going their separate way, Louis understood that his relationship with Professor Madame Dupont would not be as close as that with other teachers, but at least there was now a certain mutual respect. A few days later, in history class, teacher MS Dupont called the student intern to present topic on reconstruction after the Civil War. When Louis turned calm, he presented his subject calmly, answering question with ease. In the end, the teacher just said, good job. Two words that seemed insignificant, but which, coming from her, meant a world. At the end of the class, several classmates continued to tell him about the festival and how great it had been. Louis realized that his school life had changed. He was no longer the invisible boy, he had new friends, and music accompanied him like a standard of his identity. In the process, he learned that sometimes the most powerful way to deal with underestimation is not direct confrontation, but practical demonstration of one that comes from the heart. Many people underestimate those who don't fit their idea of talent or personality, but everyone carry a flame within them that, when ignited, can light up the entire room. Louis not only changed the perception of Professor Madame Dupont, but he also changed his own by seeing himself capable of shining and sharing his passion. If you've ever felt ignored or underestimated, remember this story. Remember him and his piano. You don't need everyone to believe in you. You just need to believe in yourself enough to show what you are capable of. Because when passion speak, it speak louder than any dub. If this story moved you, don't forget to like and subscribe to continue receiving inspiring stories. Tell us in the comments where you're watching us from and what part of the story touched you the most. Because sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones that remind us that talent, determination, and courage can break down the tallest walls. And Louis Rivers learned this in the most beautiful way, by letting his song speak on the piano, making heard what others had never dared to ask, and proving that when someone expects you to fail, there is no better answer than your own grit.